Welcome on into the show, everybody. It is episode 4, season 8 of the Hoopers Log here on episode 4, but it's season 8 for me overall. Obviously, season 8 going back to the 2014-2015 season. I started in December of 2014, the first year that the Golden State Warriors won their championship, the year that they beat the Cavs when LeBron had first come back to the Cavs. So that's a way, way, way back time machine for those of you that don't know. But today, I'm here to predict my 2021-2022 NBA regular season predictions. Now, that's regarding the playoffs, the finals, my awards. I'm giving them all to you. I'm not going to give you the records of the teams that I think are going to do what they do. It's so preposterous now, especially when it comes to, the trades that happen during the season, all the conversations, the rumors, the injuries, especially the injuries these days, how long the season is, etc. There's a lot of things that kick in for the NBA regular season that when it comes to the conversation around, well, what are your predictions before the year? Got so much changes. By the time we get to December, especially January, you'll have found out so many guys have gotten hurt. So many guys have been in the conversation of being traded with how fast guys get removed, in that December deadline regarding guys getting signed in the offseason to then come to their team. They either get released or traded or put on a leave to be DFA'd, kind of deal. You've got a bunch of things that change in the NBA season now. So giving your preseason predictions are, in my opinion, kind of hilarious. But I think it gives you some kind of credibility in regards to what you said before the year, 6 months out, in regards to how you saw things playing out and the rationale and the reasons for why they could potentially happen, give you that kind of clearance and credence onto why you have those opinions and why you have those predictions. And for us here at the Lead SM, they become predictions because we all have a very long-term ramification on, okay, this is what we've seen, this is what we think is going to happen. We have a very, very educated database on what we've seen and what we've done. And if you've heard the last month of podcasts here, the last month of what we've done here at the Lead SM on Podbean, you've heard a lot of information and data as to what's going to happen here moving forward and going into the regular season as we begin it here in about a week. And the exciting thing and the fun thing is that we're getting to the point now where we're right down the stretch of what we want to see in regards to who's going to be the teams to beat. And again, we're in a period now, as I go into my predictions here, where I had a podcast about, I want to say 9 months ago, where I brought up, we're in a really, really, really big parity-driven era right now, and we go through those every 20 years in the NBA. Back about the late 90s after MJ retired, and the balance of power shifted in the NBA from the Eastern Conference, which it was pretty balanced in the West for the most part. It was still pretty high, heavily Western Conference teams were very, very good. It was just the dominance of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. But once that disappeared, and the Utah Jazz, even back-to-back years where it was Utah and the Bulls that went to the finals in 97, 98, Spurs and Knicks in 99, granted strike-shortened year, and then you had the Lakers for 3 straight years. The late 90s, 99, 2000, nobody knew who was going to go where. Nobody knew what was going to happen. We kind of foresaw potentially the Lakers being a top-end team, but nobody had predicted that was going to happen because they had no history of that over the past decade. So the NBA went through a little minor, 2-year stretch there where they had some parity in the late 90s. In the late 70s, early 80s, before Magic jumped onto the scene, it was okay, and the Lakers, they're coming around with Magic and Bird being drafted. We kind of saw this potentially happening, and for the next decade in the 80s, you got Bird and Magic, and that dissipated parity. And then you talk about Michael Jordan, and that dissipated parity. And then the Rockets, they dissipated parity. There's a lot of parity that gets dissipated in the 80s and 90s. And so then in the mid-70s, there was a ton of parity. There were a ton of different teams and conversations and balances of power and differences that you saw. And, I just mentioned 3 eras, the late 90s, early 80s, really the early beginning of the 80s, those first couple years, even when the 76ers won the championship, before the Lakers and Celtics did what they did, that's when parity was around. It's been almost an entire generation without parity. I mean, the Lakers, the Spurs, the Warriors, and the Cavs, and the Heat. You forget about the Heat. Those 5 teams, you talk about those 5 teams over the last decade, 20 years, and really you're like, wow, that's really what the NBA's been the last 20 years, minus these last 2 years. The Raptors, the Lakers, and the Milwaukee Bucks, who just won the NBA championship. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks and what they did this past year. They won the NBA championship, but they hadn't been a consistent, over-the-top power that we would consider and talk about and remark about in regards to what they're doing, because we hadn't seen what they had done over the last 5 years. We just thought, okay, they're going to be a team when we look at them over the last 5 years. They're going to be a major disappointment. They're not going to be a consistent power. This is what they are. The Phoenix Suns came out of nowhere. Toronto had that splash in 2019 when they had Kawhi Leonard on his last year of his deal. And then you had, obviously, the Lakers with the COVID year. These last 3 years, all in all, if you really break it down, subtracting the Warriors in 2019, the Raptors, Lakers, Heat, and then obviously you look at the Bucks and Suns this past year, we've had a situation here where over the last 2+ years, we've had some serious parity in the NBA where you can't really sit back and say, oh, I know who's going to be the champion. That's a good thing for the NBA. I think it's a big time plus, and it invites more fans. It invites more opportunities to look at the league and how fun it is and the parity, and that's what makes sports fun. And I think the NBA lost a lot of that when the Warriors kept building upon their team. When they had Steph, healthy Clay, healthy Draymond, and you had all these guys playing, and that was great. But then obviously when they picked up Kevin Durant, 2017, 2018, and then if they didn't get hurt in 2019, who's to say they didn't win the championship there and win 4 or 5? And they obviously picked up DeMarcus Cousins. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but they started trying to pick up more players. They became a mega super team. And you look at that, and you also break down what happened in Miami back in the day. This is all old news. You all know about this. But the point being is that when it comes to parity in the league, it's very, very rare we get these circumstances. Over the last 50 to 60 years, parity has not been the conversation in the league. Even prior to the mid-'70s, it was all about the Boston Celtics. They were in finals after finals after finals. The last time you could really talk about the league in regards to parity in the 5 circumstances was in the mid-'50s. The mid-'70s. Then you look at the early 80s. There was a couple years there where Washington Bullets and the Sonics and a couple of those teams kind of made it a little bit apparent. But then from the early 80s all the way till the late 90s, and then from the late 90s all the way till you get to these past couple years, it's been 20 years gaps of parity. And right now we're in a bubble. With the history and of that showing, it should give you the idea and the understanding and the knowledge that when you see how the league is playing out and how it's gone historically, when you look at the overall presence of the way things go overall, history will tell us that we're going to walk back into another non-parity driven sector. But who are the teams that are going to be? Well, let's look at the Milwaukee Bucks. They've been in the circumstance and they've been in the conversation for the last 5 to 6 years, building it behind the scenes. Now they finally get to the NBA Finals, and now that they've won an NBA championship, who's to say that now with that confidence and that understanding and that growth of culture and that foundation that they've built, that now when you look at them and you see them, you don't sit there and say, oh, okay, now all of a sudden we've got this foundation, we've got this culture, and we've got this growth. Who's to say we can't just do this over and over and over? Not to say it'll be easy, because nothing's easy. But now that they know the struggles, they know the tough times, they know what it takes to have to go back and do this again, they understand all of the sacrifices and the consequences it takes to get there. Now it's to say, all we got to do is just go out and do it because we know what to do. That's a lot easier to do than doing it the first time. Again, that's not saying it's easy to go back, because it's never easy to go back. But knowing that they've had that experience to get there and to get through the hurdles and the ups and downs, they've had the experience train run their course to do these things. I think for them, it's a lot easier to come back and represent. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's 3 or 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. You can sit there right now, easily 3, sit there right now as we sit and say, yeah, they could represent the Eastern Conference and be in the NBA championship. It could happen. And I don't think anybody would be mad at that. Same with the Western Conference. The Western Conference, you could look at a legitimately 4 or 5 teams that could go in. But again, going back to 2, 3, 4 years ago, easily 4 years ago, the league was a 3-team league. It was Boston, it was Cleveland, and it was Golden State. 2017, you cannot debate here and tell me that you thought it was going to be out of those three teams going to make it? Yeah, okay, the Spurs had some splashes, and you had some other teams that had some splashes and opportunities, and the Torontos, you got those teams that kind of flashed in there for a little bit. But for the most and overwhelming majority of what you saw was, oh, okay, this is going to be the team that's going to represent. We know it's going to happen. The media is going to try to make narratives and fake it out to go to the playoffs, and then when the real basketball starts, we're going to know who's going to show up. I think we're going to slowly head back into that narrative because the NBA has been that for a vast majority of its history for the last 75 years. And I think we're going to head back into that type of narrative here moving forward. But I think we're still in the midst of parity and in the conversation of, do we think that it's going to be parity driven moving forward, or are we going to go back into the same old cliched 20-year lapse of where the great teams keep representing and then we don't really get a full representation of who all the other teams are because the parity is gone in the NBA again. I think right now we've got a shot to see more parity exist, which would be great for the overall landscape of the league, but for what the history has shown, that's just not going to be the case. Let's go to the predictions of the awards before the playoffs. For me, and I'll tell you this right now, I made a great. I don't self-promote in regards to great things because I don't know if it's great. It's only great based upon you listening on the Podbean network and everything. It has nothing to do. The lead SM. You're the ones that decide great if I make great content or not. Outside of that, I can't decide that. That's not my case. I would say the topic that I created I thought was fair and I thought was a good point to make was that the regular season in the NBA has basically been dead. It's been killed. And what I mean by that is the narratives that carry over from the regular season to the postseason don't exist. Look at the way the Milwaukee Bucks won the NBA championship this past year. Nobody was talking about them in the regular season. Everybody thought they were going to be another big disaster and that they were going to be another big disappointment, that they weren't going to live up to the hype. And I said this back in March. Before the playoffs started, April, March, back before the playoffs started. I said, listen, they're in the perfect spot. They're the 3 seed. No one's talking about them. Nobody thinks that they're going to do it because of the years of disaster and disappointment and underachieving. And everybody thinks Giannis is this great player. Well, how can you really prove that if he hasn't won a championship? I said this coming into the playoffs last year, and everybody was looking at me like, oh, yeah, they've always been disappointing. Everybody said the same exact thing about the Raptors in 2019. Granted, they had some help with the injuries on the Warriors side, so they got some kind of let back and got back in, and obviously Kawhi Leonard jumped into the fold, and they won an NBA championship. We cannot bank on, of 2 of the last 3 NBA championships, we cannot bank on this idea that because you haven't done it in the past and that you haven't made it there, that you haven't been making strides over the years to improve and get better. The Milwaukee Bucks finally shattered that conversation and that narrative, I think, this past year. There's a lot of teams that could step forward and make those leaps and bounds to be an improvement upon what they've done. We just assume in the NBA that everything stays the same. That is not how it goes. The NBA has finally gotten to a point where teams who stick together and build a culture and build a formality, a foundation, that they can finally find a way to get themselves to move up to that next rank and eventually win an NBA championship, which is what the Bucks did over these last 6 years. I've watched it firsthand. I've seen them go from a team that was overachieving, getting into the playoffs, getting dominated by Chicago back in 2015, and then all of a sudden now they're the team that's in the conversation of being a favorite to win the NBA championship. They have built that culture through and through. That has not been a fake front office, let's sign free agents and call it a day. No, they've signed key pieces. They've signed key players to be role position type guys who fit their mold and what they need to do to win an NBA championship. They didn't sign megalodon superstars to come in and take over and win a championship. They didn't do that. They built this all the way through and through the right way. And that's what I think the NBA wants to get back to. They want to get back to that narrative of we don't just need guys with big names and big sponsorships to come in and take over teams and win championships. We've got an entire culture and circumstance that can build on and build upon what's going to happen. And I wanted to bring that up because in the regular season, we try to spin narratives and spin conversation, which is great for ratings and obviously great for us here at the Lead SM. And obviously with our audio network, we're going to have guys create and conversate the real narratives and the real topics that are going on as they go on. But I want to differentiate that narrative and those conversations for you in regards to who's winning an NBA championship from what's going to happen from mid-April all the way through June. Because that's how it works. From mid-April all the way to June, all the stuff we talk about from now until mid-April doesn't mean anything. Now, you want to talk about maybe March or early April in regards to teams getting ready for the playoffs? Yes, obviously, we'll take that into consideration, and that will matter for a championship team. But really, from now, mid-October until all the way till, really, really the midway portions of March, end of March, really once April begins, for the next 6 months, you're going to look at it and be like, well, does it really matter if we don't go to the playoffs? That's just being flat out honest. That's what the Warriors and other teams who've been dominant over the last 5 to 6 years have really created, unfortunately. And now when you talk about regular season success, it doesn't correlate and match up to what could potentially happen for the NBA championship. And that's sad, and that sucks, but that's just been the narrative and the realization and the reality for however long I've been doing this for the last 8 years, at least in the basketball landscape. Other sports, different narrative, different conversation, but in the world of basketball, no, it's become fair and tried and true. It's just the facts. You've got to see how a team operates in the playoffs to get a real sense of what they can do moving forward and to improve upon. Seeding doesn't necessarily meet everything. It's always been that way, I feel like. You look at the Cavs, they were the fifth seed or whatever a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And they still made the NBA Finals, 2017, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And they did not look great going down the stretch of the regular season. Bam, turned it on, got to the NBA Finals. They got swept by the Warriors, but they were a team that got there all the way. Maybe I'm thinking 2018, but you get my point. Like, there's a lot of things that happen in the regular season that don't correlate. MVPs, awards, etc. But we're here to talk about that today because obviously we want to give you some kind of understanding and foundation for what we're predicting here at the Lead SM. Okay, let's go to my awards for predicting for the 2017. My Lord, I'm thinking I got 2017, 2018 on my mind. My mind's still trying to think of the Warriors and Cavs. But no, let's go back to where we are right now. 2021, 2022. The 2022 awards that are going to be awarded, as the playoffs go on. I don't know if they're going to do an award ceremony this year or whatever, but either way, here I go. We'll start off with the ones that are really the unpredictable ones, which I think are unfair to predict before the year, but they're fun to rationalize and conversate because there's an opportunity for, a lookout and a thing to look forward to and as to how they're going to play themselves out. The most improved, I think Michael Porter Jr. for the Denver Nuggets he's my pick. I think he's got the biggest shot because the Denver Nuggets are a team that have been building a platform and a foundation over the last 3 or 4 years now, especially with Nikola Jokic winning the MVP last year. They're a team and an opportunity there where you look at them and you say, okay, they have some pieces now and they have a legitimate foundation and a culture where you sit there and you see them and you say, wow, I think Michael Porter Jr., if he comes back to the form in which he was prior to his injury at Missouri and his overall problems that he was having health-wise, I think he could be a legitimate force on this team and help them get to a big, big stepping stone in their process and their maturation as a franchise. I think it's a big, 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 big conversation and a big thing to have for him, be a big step-up piece in them for them to do what they should do this year, which is really be in the conversation for a potential Western Conference Finals appearance, if not NBA Finals appearance, and represent the Western Conference. They've got a big-time opportunity to do so. I think if everybody takes the next step forward, which I think they can do after the last 2 years of, I wouldn't say being disappointments in the playoffs, but really creating those stepping stones, Michael Porter Jr. has to be a part of that, and being the most improved player in the league will definitely be that portion because there's a ton of good candidates to be a most improved player. And it could really be, there's like 20 to 30 different players on the Vegas line for who could be potentially the most improved player in the league. And there is legitimately like 5 to 10 guys you could sit back and say, yeah, I could see, yeah. Well, that's every year with most improved. And it could really come out of nowhere. So that's why I picked Michael Porter Jr. because for where I see the league going this year, I think he could be the one to be that potential conversation. Coach of the year, this one I think is long overdue. And honestly, it could be up to, there's always, every year, there's like 5 or 6 different guys where you sit back and you say, yeah, they could win Coach of the Year, they could win Coach of the Year, and usually we're wrong. So it's one of those where you sit back and you say, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So Nate McMillan is mine. Let's be honest. The way he coached last year in Atlanta with the team that they had and the start that they had and then ultimately getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, they looked absolutely phenomenal last year. They hit every single ceiling point that they could as a franchise last year, getting as deep as they could, playing as well as they did, and Nate McMillan was the big piece of that. And if they do anything to a similar nature this year, I think Nate McMillan is going to get credited with it. Nate McMillan, when he was in Indiana, was also a phenomenal coach. I remember Nate McMillan coaching for the Sonics way back in the day. He was absolutely phenomenal there. He has been a phenomenal coach everywhere he's been pretty much his entire career. I mean, he's had a couple bumps in the road, and he's gotten fired for legitimate reasons. But I think overall, when you look at the landscape of what he's had to do the last, since he got to Atlanta, I don't know how long he was there, but I think he got there in like February. He did a phenomenal job getting them to the Eastern Conference Finals, and there's nothing more you could really ask of him, especially with the teams he had to face. And that's a big credit to him, and that's a big credit to that organization. I think if he does anything similar to that, he could be in the conversation and could win the Coach of the Year award. Okay, another one that I think is impossible to predict is the sixth man of the year. There's like 4 or 5 legitimate candidates that you could pick from this year, I think. I'm going to pick Joe Ingles because he's been in the conversation a couple times. I think he's been nominated once or twice the last couple years, and I think finally he breaks through. Utah has a bench that's legitimate, but I think Joe Ingles finally becomes the guy where you sit there and you say, man, if he can just hit these shots from the outside, he becomes a real lethal opportunity off the bench for their second unit, and a guy who can slip into that first unit every once in a while to kick in for the three-pointer on top of his ability to play make a little bit. I mean, he's not a great playmaker. He's not known for that, but he can do it every once in a while, on an occasion here and there, and sometimes he's clutch when he does them. So I think Joe Ingles could be in the conversation for sixth man. Obviously, Jordan Clarkson won it last year for Utah. They've got a phenomenal bench. I mean, he could win it again. Jordan Clarkson could, but I think Joe Ingles might be the other guy that could do it. And I think the media will try and find a way to say, hey, this guy's been unbelievable over the last however many years. Why don't we give it to him? How come he hasn't gotten it? Let's give it to him. Let's find a way because he's been that good. And I think Utah, with how good they're going to be this year, I think he's got a shot to be in it. And I think Utah will have multiple sixth man of the years coming off the bench this year. And I think they'll be a phenomenal team. I mean, Utah's in that conversation for being an NBA championship contender, and I think to win awards in the regular season for what you've done over the given years on top of the year you've actually played, I think it's a big, 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 big thing. And I think Joe Ingles is one of the guys you can look at and say, yeah, he's got a shot to win sixth man of the year. He's in the conversation. I don't think he's the favorite, but he's in the conversation to get it. And I think it'd be interesting to see if he found a way to improve that second unit and make them even better, which they were phenomenal last year. Then that would give you the clearance and the credence to say, yeah, no, he's sixth man of the year, and he's got the shot. I don't know how much I believe in it, but again, sixth man of the year is very, very hard to predict because honestly, half the time, usually it's a guy we all know and we've known forever, or it's a guy that legitimately comes out of absolutely nowhere, and then we're like, wow, yeah, he deserves to be sixth man. So I think Joe Ingles is going to get it this year out of Utah, just for throwing her name out there. Okay, Rookie of the Year. Everybody's been saying Cade Cunningham coming out of Detroit. I believe it wholeheartedly. However many years I've been doing this, the Rookie of the Year has been very, very easy to predict. It hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been everything we've needed to be. But in regards to where we are and what we're doing in regards to the Rookie of the Year prediction and what we've seen over the years, usually the favorite gets it done. And I think Cade Cunningham is in that conversation. There's a couple other guys. I can't name them off the top of my head. But in regards to their abilities and what they have and what they represent, I think it's an opportunity for the Rookie of the Year to be something that is relatively in place. And so I think Cade Cunningham's going to represent this year. He had a phenomenal time before getting to the NBA. I think he'll represent as well again. Okay, here are my big predictions in regards to where we have things going. Defensive Player of the Year. Draymond Green, I think, is going to win it this year. He was absolutely lights out last year in regards to his ability to win the Defensive Player of the Year, 4 or 5 years ago? But he was in the conversation again this year. Obviously, Rudy Gobert was in the conversation this year, and he won it again. And the big thing that I saw in regards to his ability to win it was that his ability to impact the paint was critical. I think a big thing this year in the NBA is going to be perimeter play and perimeter impact on what's going to happen with the importance, especially of where the Golden State Warriors are going to be when it comes to winning the NBA championship. They're trying to get back into that conversation. Sorry, and I don't think they're going to win the championship. I don't think the Warriors are even in the conversation of winning the championship this year. That's not because they're not a good team. I just don't think overall, in regards to where they are and what they're doing, I don't think they have that opportunity overall because they're just not matched up overall with everybody else. But Draymond Green is a massive, massive reason as to why they'll be successful this year. He has to be. And if it's going to be anything that he does in particular, it's defensively. And his defensive presence is what's going to overall change the dynamic of what this team could be again and come back to the foundation of what they were before all of this happened. So that's where I think Draymond Green's going to be, and that's what I think Draymond Green's going to have happen for him. MVP, I have been known to predict the MVP of the NBA before the year fairly regularly. Now, back in 2017, or the 2016-2017 season, I predicted Russell Westbrook before the year. Everybody thought it was crazy. They're like, what are you talking about? He lost KD. He has to legitimately get his team into the playoffs. As KD leaves, you need to get him in. Boom. I said he'd win because he's probably going to average triple-double. I'm not saying he's going to average triple. This is before he did it 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row or however long he's done it in a row. But this goes back to listen, he's a freak of nature. He's going to be unleashed. He can do what he wants. Bam, won the MVP. I said James Harden would win it the next year because James Harden was owed it based on the fact that he had times in his career where he was the legitimate best player in the league, but he didn't get the award because for some reason the media was like trying to find someone else to find when he should have won it a couple years in a row because he was phenomenal. In fact, you could have made the case, could have won the MVP back in 2017. You could have made the case that he was going to make the MVP in 2017. Or in the year Russell Westbrook won it. You could have made the case he's going to win in 2015. I said 2018, he's winning the MVP this year because he has to be the guy in Houston. He has to be the guy. He can't just be a guy. He has to be, and he did. He won it. And then in 2019, I came out and I said, I think Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to win MVP. Bam, he won MVP. I was right. It's like, I don't know how hard these things have to be in regards to our ability to predict things and how they're going to come across and how they're going to play out and how they're going to happen. 2020, I was wrong. I said Anthony Davis would win MVP, and I said Giannis Antetokounmpo would win Defensive Player of the Year. Well, Giannis won both, and Anthony Davis came in second, or he didn't even come in the conversation of MVP, but I thought Anthony Davis, if the Lakers are going to be as high as everybody was predicting them, Anthony Davis was going to have to be the guy. Last year, I think I said LeBron would win MVP. I thought LeBron legitimately could have won it again because he was so phenomenal the year Giannis won it in 2020, when the COVID year. I honestly thought the way he played that year and the way he could play again this year would have been very determinant and could have predicted his ability to win the MVP. He didn't win the MVP. It happens. He still had a great year considering the age he's at, but I think LeBron now, for where he's at in his career, we're at a point now where I think legitimately we can all step back and say, I think MVPs are out of the conversation. Now, that doesn't mean he can't finish top 3 in MVP. That doesn't mean the media won't find a way to scramble his name around to try and figure out a way to get him back into that conversation of the MVP, because we all have to have LeBron James in our dialect, in our dialogue these days, our thesaurus, dictionary, you name the entity in Wikipedia page. You have to name the entity in which you talk about basketball. If you don't have LeBron James in your documentation of any kind in which you're talking about, then all of a sudden you become some kind of hater, or you have no idea what you're talking about. But I'm just trying to get to the point here. I thought LeBron would win MVP last year because I thought he legitimately could carry his team the way he did in the NBA Finals. He was phenomenal in the NBA Finals in 2020. And I thought he could carry that back around, with the season starting up 8 weeks later. I thought he'd find a way to do that. Well, it didn't. It happens. I mean, but he had a great year nonetheless, was still a phenomenal player. He just wasn't in the MVP conversation, which happens. My MVP for the 2021-2022 season, I have Kevin Durant, and for simple reasons. First of all, we all know the Kyrie Irving story from last year. Dude was in and out. Kyrie Irving's a space cadet, let's just be honest. He's a phenomenal. He's one of the greatest, if not greatest, finishing point guards of all time. He's in the conversation. He is this generation's greatest, as we move forward. Not, I would say Tony Parker is in that conversation of greatest finishing point guards ever because he won an MVP of the finals, for God's sakes, in 2007 because he was that good. Isaiah Thomas back in the 80s. There's a bunch of other guys you can bring up as well. But in regards to now, as we talk right now, the current king of finishing at the rim for the point guard position is Kyrie Irving, and there's no debate. But he's a space cadet. He either shows up or he doesn't. It doesn't matter what the reason is or why. He's either on the floor or he's not. And then sometimes when he's on the floor, he doesn't even show up. He's 11 points off one of 2 of 10 shooting, and he had a couple free throws, or he will show up and he'll go off for 50. So he's very, very, very inconsistent in regards to the regular season. Now, postseason, that's a different story. He's an NBA champion. For reasons we all know. But we know he's a space cadet. James Harden lately, he's still unbelievable. James Harden is still, in my opinion, the best shooting guard in the league. He's improved his ability. I don't know if you want to call him a shooting guard. He still might be a point guard in some people's minds. In fact, the way he still plays as a point guard position. But you get my point. Kevin Durant overall has found a way, coming back from his injury, with guys like James Harden and Kyrie Irving. Again, unbelievable talents, unbelievable players, great players, all-time Hall of Famers. We know they're going to the Hall of Fame, all of them. And they've grown into an inconsistent bunch. Whether that's because of health, whether that's because of personal reasons, whether that's because of... And Harden's become kind of an injury problematic guy over the last however many years. I mean, even his MVP year, he got hurt. Everybody forgets that. He got hurt his MVP year. The year after he won his MVP, he got hurt. A couple summers ago, he got hurt. Harden has become kind of a liability, health-wise. He's not Kawhi. He doesn't sit out games because he wants to sit out games. He's played in entire seasons before. He's played 82 games in an entire season before. The dude comes out and he plays, period. We all know that. But at the same time, sometimes you're just not available because you're not healthy. And that's, unfortunately, James Harden has kind of come down that route as to becoming one of those kind of guys where he's just not healthy. It happens. It's not his fault. Nothing against him as a player and how good he is, because I still think he's the best two guard in the league if he is that. If he's not, he's in the top 5 of point guards. He's unbelievable. But somebody has to carry the load. And if everybody is going to be banking on Brooklyn to be this top seed in the East and being in the conversation of being the NBA champion or being in the conversation of being an NBA championship and being the best team in the Eastern Conference, somebody has to carry the load. And Kevin Durant, last year, throughout the entire year, nobody had Kevin Durant on the MVP conversation because he's coming back from a freaking, all these Achilles, all these problems with his legs, all of them. And he came out last year, and yeah, he didn't. I think he didn't play a couple games. I think he had COVID again or whatever. Like, he was off and on, right? In regards to that, come postseason, KD was back to, if not better than, which is saying a lot, because he is in the conversation still as the best player in basketball. And let me be frank, in that semifinals against the Bucks, you can make the case that Kevin Durant came right back to form, and even defensively, he looked phenomenal. And that's after all the injuries. He now has an entire offseason of rest, of regular, systematic, going through the motions, doing what he used to do at Golden State, ready to go, hyped up, on the bus, ready to dominate type of mentality. And with the way his team is constructed around him, which has a lot of talent, a lot of really good players, a lot of old, former legitimate superstars in the NBA, or in the conversation of superstars in the NBA, used to be guys who were all team NBA, all NBA players. And they're either going to be out because of injuries or because of lineup changes or whatever. KD's not going to mess around. He's going to come out. He's going to play 40-plus minutes a night. Probably not every night, but for the most part every night. He'll probably play 70 to 75 games this year. He won't play every single game. That's fine. Everybody understands that. Nobody will hate somebody who plays 70 or more games in the NBA. That's a great year. It's a long season. You take 2 games off a month, that's 70 games. That's literally what you're doing. That's fine. Kevin Durant has to come out and absolutely ball out for this Brooklyn Nets narrative, for them to be a top team in the East, for them to be there. I'm sorry to tell you, they have all this talent, Chris. What are you talking about? Well, they have to be there and actually play. KD is a guy who doesn't just take nights off. He might take a night off after a back-to-back. He might take a night off because of his legs, and God forbid his Achilles acts back up and he has to take another couple days off. I think Kevin Durant, if healthy, is going to win the MVP of the NBA this year. And he's going to win it for the first time since 2014, the first time in 8 years. Think about that. When was the last time we saw a guy who won the MVP 8 years after he won it the first time, in 2014? He's got a legitimate shot at doing it again, and it's not because he's the best scorer in the league, because we all know his lethality from the outside and his ability to shoot the mid-range and all what he can do. We know he's got a bag. Kevin Durant's got a bottomless peanut bag of offensive moves. We all know what he can do offensively. But his ability to step up defensively and be more consistent like he did in Golden State, if he can get back to that level altogether, and bring that intensity every night, needing him to be the man to carry Brooklyn on certain nights because certain guys aren't going to either be there because of health or personal reasons or whatever other Space Cadet reasons they don't be there. Kevin Durant has to be the absolute man. And nobody would debate that. I think everybody could see Kevin Durant winning the MVP for those reasons alone. There's multiple other guys you can bring in the conversation for winning MVP. Multiple. There's a couple guys I think you could just sit back and say, yeah, they could win it too. They could win it too. They could win it too. LeBron obviously could always be in that narrative again. We look at, I had this other guy in my mind the other day, but KD came so into focus just in regards to, wow, he really has to be the man for them to win anything long term in the regular season, and that's Kevin Durant. He just popped in my head, and he had to be the man. But there are a couple other guys for sure. If they won the MVP, I would not be upset or disappointed or overreacting. Like if Joel Embiid played, and if Ben Simmons is there or not, if Joel Embiid played and he played the way he played last year, he could win MVP. He was phenomenal last year until he got hurt. So I think that Kevin Durant has to be the man, and if he's not, Brooklyn's not going anywhere. Okay, playoff predictions. the fun stuff, the fun things here. Okay, let's get this going here. We got to go quick. I know we've already gone a little long. We're already about 35 minutes in. But, no, overall, my playoff predictions are fairly simple. We'll give this about 10 minutes and then we're out. In the Western Conference, we're just going to give you standings, ratings, and we're not going to give you, how many wins, etc. We're not going that deep. We're just telling you, what their standing is at and what ranking they are overall, and then we'll get you to the playoff scenarios and the championship, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Western Conference, I have the 10th seed. We're going to go from bottom to top. 10th seed, I have the San Antonio Spurs. Listen, I don't know what kind of roster they're going to have. They got a pretty wonky roster this year altogether. But when you overall look at their layout and what they're doing, Greg Popovich has got quite a bit of tools this year. And to be honest with you, if he does anything like he's done in the past, he's just going to find a way to make these guys competitive, and they're going to be a team that's going to be reckoned with. They're not going to be anything fancy. They're not going to be anything special, but they're going to be a working hard, blue-collar team. And there's a couple of teams you could mention, potentially getting to that 10th spot that obviously you could bring up. Sacramento, I've heard. But I think the San Antonio Spurs will just get there because that's just what they do. They find a way to keep it interesting, and that's what they've done for the last 25 years. Number 9, I've got Portland. I think Portland's going to be in there. Listen, they lost their head coach. They're changing dynamics. Their team's a little different. They're going to be really good. I just think they're going to come short of an official seeding, which granted we know the play-in scenario is what it is. But they'll be in that conversation for a play-in scenario, and they'll have a chance to compete for that. The number 8 team, I got Memphis. Memphis is going to make a little bit of a step up. They're going to be fine. They're going to do good. They're going to do good things. Memphis will make their way up in the rankings as well. I mean, Ja Morant is what he is. They're a phenomenal team. Dallas is going to be the 7th seed. There's Dallas. Why Dallas? They got Luka Doncic. He's the new Larry Bird / James Harden / no. Dallas is just they're trying to still figure out things in a new way in the NBA with usage of literally giving Luka Doncic everything and all the responsibilities. He's just not, he's unbelievable. Luka Doncic can win MVP this year. He was the guy I was thinking of. He could win MVP this year. You're not winning MVP if you get the 7th seed and your team's expected to make the playoffs with what you're already going to do. That's just the same old. That's not MVP worthy. I'm sorry. That's just not the case. 6th seed, yes. Golden State is back in the playoffs. And Klay Thompson comes back by Christmas, I hear. They are going to be a phenomenal team to play with. Steph Curry, you can make the debate right now, outside of Kyrie Irving and his ability to finish, is possibly the best point guard in the game right now still, just by his ability to score the basketball. He went off on a tear last year and at the end of the season, and that was the reason why they almost had a shot at going to the playoffs. They were absolutely phenomenal down the stretch. And if they carry that into this season and Klay Thompson comes back, they're going to be a team to reckon with. They're going to be a phenomenal chance at doing big things. I think Phoenix will get back to the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be as high as seeded as they were. They'll get the 5th spot. They'll be good. They'll be decent. And they'll be fun to watch. I got the Clippers getting the 4th spot. I know it's a little high. Everybody's like, well, what the heck? They got injuries. They got these problems. They're still not, they kind of dropped off. They lost some players, etc. I know. But they've got somewhat of a culture there, and they're doing something. They're improving. I think they're getting better. And they're gonna be good. I think they're gonna be good this year. They got a lot of things to work out and a lot of things to figure out overall. They've gotten a little worse than over the years, but I think culture again speaks to it, and I think they're gonna be okay. I think they're gonna build upon it, and I think they're gonna be fine. 3 seed Utah. Enough said. They've got an incredible team. They could be better than 3. They could easily get the 1 seed again. They're a fantastic team. The 4-time Defensive Player of the Year in Rudy Gobert, definitely deserve it. He could easily win Defensive Player of the Year again. He's just been that remarkable and that much of an impact down low in the paint. And obviously Donovan Mitchell making another step forward, potentially 6th Man of the Year, Joe Ingles, and obviously 6th Man of the Year last year, Jordan Clarkson. They've got an unbelievable team. They got a shot to be a topper, higher end team in the Western Conference. Number 2, Denver. Denver is on a mission, folks. They are on a mission to take the next step. If Jamal Murray is healthy, they are a very, very scary team to deal with. Defending MVP Nikola Jokic, they are absolutely a team to be reckoned with in the Western Conference. They could easily finish with the 1 seed. I got them at number 2. But number 1, I got the Lakers. And listen, it's fairly obvious. They are a team that is must-watch television this regular season. They're going to be a team where they could easily be in the conversation for a championship, and they could easily win the championship. They've got that kind of hype. They've got that kind of narrative. It just has to come together, and there's a lot that has to come together. I don't lack the faith in their head coach. I'm blanking on his name right now. It's not good at all. I should know his name. I hype the man up all the time. I love their head coach. in LA. That's not good. I'm blanking, but, times are changing. But he's a phenomenal head coach. I think he'll figure it out. I just think there's going to be a lot of growing pains. But once they figure out those growing pains, whether it's late or early, I think this is going to be the most fun-watch team in the league because there's just so many superstars that are connected. Eastern Conference, we'll go through the 10 through 1. My 10 seed is the Charlotte Hornets. They just looked young last year. They were good, but they looked young when it came to the playoffs and everything else, and just they were inconsistent. They were a good team. They were a decent team, but when it came to those playoff games, they just ran into a complete wall. And I think that's the similar case this year. Charlotte also is a team where you look at them and you're like, they could take a next step. They could be good. They could be this. But at the same time, when it comes to that long-term ability and carryover, I don't know if they can have that carryover. They're at that phase in their transition ability or their rebuild where it's like, they could go back to the playoffs and be a 7 or 8. They could be a 7 or 6 seed and be decent, or at the same time they could just kind of fall flat on their face and finish, out of a playoff spot, but in that play-in scenario and then fall flat on their face again. I don't know where they're at, and that's why I put them at 10. Number 9, I got the Knicks. I think the Knicks had a phenomenal year last year. I think they outgrew everybody's expectations. They did great things. They were fantastic overall. I thought they were phenomenally fun to watch, but we got to be realistic. Can they do it again? I don't think so. I think they're going to have a fun year. I think they're going to be good, but they're going to fall into a play-in game, and I think they're going to have a chance to represent themselves and go back to the playoffs. So I got them at 9. I got Boston at 8. Boston is going to fall back to normalcy. They've got incredible players. I mean, health has really been their Achilles heel, so to speak. They've really had a lot of problems with health and guys to stay healthy overall in regards to their depth. And Brad Stevens really didn't help their progression as players and as a team. And whomever they've got now as their head coach, I don't remember, but whomever they got now as their head coach, I don't know if it's going to impact them immediately. So I think the overall impression for the Boston Celtics is they just got to find a way to get into a play-in scenario and find a way to get in, because if they do, well, then next thing you know, the Boston Celtics have a chance to do something big in the playoffs, because if they're healthy going in, well, then they've got a legitimate shot to do big things. Number 7, I got the Chicago Bulls. Why? Chicago Bulls, why? They have got a lineup. They have got an opportunity, and they have got a team where you can sit there and say they could be nasty. They could be this year's New York Knicks, where they come out of nowhere. They're fun to watch. They're really the darling of the league, because all of a sudden they're back to being Chicago, the tough-nosed, really, really pesky team. They've got a really, really revamped roster, and I think they're going to be incredibly fun to watch. And then they got a shot at being a playoff team. I mean, they're going to be in a play-in game at the 7th seed, but they got a shot at being a big-time team, and it's big stuff for them. I got Chicago at 7. Number 6, Indiana. Indiana is going to also step up again this year. I think they're going to be fine. Health and everything else is going to go their way. I think they're going to have a good shot at being good. They could easily be in the play-in scenario, but that's honestly the teams outside of the top 5 in the Eastern Conference. It's really anybody could be in the play-in scenario, and it could all really kind of all come to a head, because honestly the top 5 teams in the East are all in their own scenario. You can make the debate whether you have Atlanta or Miami in the 4th or 5th spot, but that's where I got both of them. I got Miami finishing 5. I got Atlanta finishing 4. That's why I got Nate McMillan finishing Coach of the Year, because he's going to get the 4th seed with Atlanta. That's going to be phenomenal. That's going to be an amazing thing for them, because they didn't have the home court advantage last year because they played the Knicks in the first round. They didn't have the home court. So, obviously, I think they'll have it this year. It'll bolster Nate McMillan into the conversation of being Coach of the Year. Miami, Eric Spoelstra, the team they have, they've improved. They've gotten better. They could easily be a top 4, top 3 team this year. But I think Philly is going to finish 3 again. I think Philadelphia is going to find a way to get themselves into that narrative and that conversation of being the 3 seed. I don't know if they're going to get 1 again. They're not going to get the 1 seed or anything like that. I think they take a little bit of a step back, but they're still a top 3 team in the East. Number 2, defending champs, Milwaukee Bucks. They're still phenomenal, but we all know what they're made of. They're bringing the whole team back. They're bringing the whole band back together to try to repeat. They've got a shot to do so. I believe that they can definitely do that. But obviously the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference is going to be the Brooklyn Nets. Come on. Look at all the talent they have. They're loaded. They're absolutely stocked. And if you're going to have MVP Kevin Durant be in the conversation of being the MVP, he has to be the MVP if they're going to be the number 1 seed. If he doesn't finish in the MVP conversation, if they're the 1 seed, then that's a crime on the NBA, unless some other player just came out of nowhere and went absolutely bananas. So that's where I've got the rankings in the Eastern Conference. Let's roll down the playoff scenario here in the NBA. Obviously, you see all the matchups and the seedings there. If you've written it down, if you haven't written it down, we've got the play-in scenario games where we've got in the Western Conference, we've got Portland and San Antonio, and the 8-7 seeds are going to be Dallas, and who did I have the other 8th seed in the West? I had the Memphis Grizzlies. So Dallas and Memphis will play in the play-in game, and then you'll have Portland and San Antonio. I think Portland beats San Antonio fairly easily, and then I think Memphis beats Dallas, and then I have Dallas beating Portland, and Dallas being the 8th seed, and then Memphis being the 7th seed. So then you would have in the Western Conference, you would have the Lakers playing the Mavs in the first round, which would be phenomenal. Be phenomenal television. And then you'd have Memphis playing Denver, Utah playing Golden State, and then the Clippers playing the Suns in the first round. So you would have yourself some pretty good, interesting matchups. And if everybody's healthy, boy, you talk about some fun first-round matchups. That would be fantastic in the Western Conference. Now, in the Eastern Conference, obviously you got Charlotte playing New York. I think New York wins that game. And then you got Boston playing Chicago. And I think Chicago beats Boston. So then it would be Boston versus New York in that play-in game to get to the 8th spot. Boy, you talk about fun. That would be an interesting, sensational game. And it would be in Boston. I think Boston would beat New York. Unfortunately, or excuse me, my bad. No, my bad. I got the Knicks beating the Celtics. I think my logic on this for the Celtics beating, or excuse me, for the Knicks beating the Celtics, is that something about the Celtics with this new coaching organization and the new route they're going as a team with Brad Stevens higher up in the GM position, etc., and them going through a big transition phase in the front office, there's something that tells me that they have the talent to be phenomenal and to be good and to be respectable and to be a really, really good team. But something just irks at me saying that something's going to happen late in the year where it doesn't all click and they just they don't fall apart, but they don't finish out getting to the playoffs. Like, they get the 8th seed, everyone's happy, and they're content, and then they get to the play-in scenario, and it's just like, oh, they're not ready yet. Not to say that them as a team or talent-wise aren't ready yet, but just them as the front office is something's gonna just not work out overall, and they're gonna absolutely not play to the level that everybody thought. I think it'll fire them up for next year, for the 2022-2023 season, but I think overall, when we look at this year, there's going to be some real growth pains in regards to how they're going to operate as a team and their system and what they want to do and the chemistry with the coach. And I don't think it's going to work all the way. So I got the Knicks winning. They're going to be the 8th seed. They're going to play the Brooklyn Nets in the first round. Obviously, the 7, who is the Chicago Bulls, they'll play the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round. And then you've got Philadelphia, who's going to play Philadelphia is going to play... so they'd be the 3 seed. The 6 seed would be Indiana. So Philly would play Indiana, and then you got Atlanta and good Lord, Atlanta and kind of doing this on kind of a whim right now. Atlanta and see, that's bad. I should know that. That's not good. Atlanta and Miami. There you go. Good Lord. And those of you listening are probably freaking out and yelling at me. What the hell, Chris? Why don't you know this? Oh my God. Well, some of us kind of have lives. Anyway. So those are the matchups. Okay. Give me 1 second. I got my matchups. Let me put my glasses on and all this stuff. You know, I'm getting old now. No, I'm actually not putting on my glasses. I'm actually doing other things. I'm multitasking as we speak. First round matchups, I think, are fairly simple and are fairly easy for the most part. Lakers playing the... 1 second. The Lakers playing Dallas, they're going to win the series 4-1. I think Lakers are going to win their series, go up 4-1, and they're going to go play into the next round fairly easy. Denver, they're going to win 4-1 over Memphis, and they're going to go in and play the next round as well. Got Utah winning their series over Golden State. Golden State's just not ready yet. I think they're one step away from being one of those top seeds in the West, but playing Utah in the first round is absolutely brutal and absolutely devastating. That's just really tough, and I don't think they can beat Golden State can beat Utah in a first round matchup. 1 second, 4 seed or 3 seed going into the second round. Okay, then we got the Clippers and Phoenix Suns. Okay, so this will be a great series again. I think the Clippers will win the series, not because I don't think Phoenix can't, because they're a phenomenal team, but I think the Clippers are going to be like, you know what, I'm done with this. Like, I'm done with being the lower-end team. Let's go. Let's get this done. Let's make this happen. So then the Clippers will beat them in 7 games. They'll go into the next round, and it'll be Denver and Utah in one round. and then it'll be the Lakers and Clippers in the other round. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Since the Clippers beat the Lakers, they're going to have a lot of momentum and a lot of confidence in where they can go from here. They've got superstars on their team in Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, especially if Kawhi's healthy. And I think the age of the Lakers is going to kick in real quick. I think the Lakers are going to lose to the Clippers in 7 games. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be the series of the year. And I think it's going to be a fun year, Battle of LA, all that stuff. It's going to be great. So I got the Clippers winning that series, and I got Denver beating Utah. The other West Coast series, I got Denver beating Utah. And Denver is just ready to go. They are a team that is poised to go as far as they want to go, and they're ready to make it happen. And then I got Denver in the Western Conference Finals beating the Los Angeles Clippers 4-1, making it easy. Denver's going to be, I think, the favorite going into the finals this year. I think they're going to be the favorite. In my opinion, I have them as a big-time conversational piece favorite to be a Western Conference representative and potentially be an NBA champion. Now, the Eastern Conference side of things, Brooklyn's going to beat New York 4-1. Milwaukee's going to beat Chicago 4-0. They're going to sweep them. I got Philly beating Indy 4-2. And then I've got Miami beating Atlanta 4-2. I know. Name McMillan won Coach of the Year. What's your problem? They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Listen, Miami has got Eric Spoelstra, who's, let's be honest, one of the best coaches in all of basketball. He's better than Nate McMillan. And they're easily going to beat them. It's going to be a gentleman's 6-game series. I got Miami playing Brooklyn in the second round, and then I've got Milwaukee playing Philadelphia. And I think those are legitimately the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference. I legitimately think that. I think Miami and Brooklyn have a phenomenal series. I think it goes 7, but I think a lot of the games are blowouts because there's mismatches on overall both teams at certain points, depending on the type of game and who gets hot and who doesn't. But Brooklyn's going to win the series. They're going to win it 4-3. They're going to win it in 7. And I think, honestly, because Brooklyn is going to win the series 4-3, it's going to be tough. I think it's going to wear them out. Miami is very physical, and they're a very, very good team. They're going to pose problems. They're going to pose overall issues moving forward. And I think Brooklyn's going to get blueprinted out a little bit. And I think the team who's going to face them is Milwaukee. Milwaukee is going to absolutely steamroll Philadelphia. They're going to beat Philadelphia bad. And it's going to look easy. Then they're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals again. Brooklyn and Milwaukee. Going to be interesting. Everyone's going to be hyped up. Okay, Brooklyn, they can come back. They're the 1 seed. They have the home court advantage now. Now it's Kevin Durant's turn to come out and go back to the NBA Finals and represent and make his name known that he can do it by himself with, guys like James Harden and Kyrie Irving and those guys who can make it happen. Milwaukee's not having any of that. Everybody's going to say Milwaukee has no chance because, they beat Brooklyn on an easy, Game 7 where all of a sudden Kevin Durant, if he would have hit that 3, it would have been a chance. No. Milwaukee's coming out and they're saying, no, this is our world. They're going to win it in 6. They're going to go to the NBA championship. They're going to play Denver. It's going to be Milwaukee and Denver. Relatively middle of the country type series. And I think Milwaukee is going to win the series in 6. I think Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to win MVP of the finals. I think overall, it's going to be one of those situations where we look back and we say, yeah, Milwaukee back-to-back champions. Makes sense. I think they can do it. I think they're going to make it happen. They are talented enough. They have a very similar team built as last year, and they're good enough to make it happen. All right, everybody. We're a week out from the NBA regular season starting. Next week, we'll talk about the regular season and the hype that there is of opening night. Because opening week is always phenomenal in the NBA. All right. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Have a good one.